Call the Finance Committee meeting of August 29th to order. And roll call, please.
Mr. Legess. Mr. Vickery.
Present.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Stauffenberg. Mr. Hess. Mr. Mulcahy. Mr. Seroy. Mr. Hildebrand. Mr. Einfeld. Ms. Weber. Mr. Payton. Ms. Dunbar. Mr. Ritter. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Zenz. Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Lear. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I have had no applications for public comment, and I have no presentations. The minutes are not done yet, and we'll move on to Treasurer's Office, Nick Africano. Good. How you doing today?
Good morning.
There you
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, I just have two things. I'm going to say the word escheatment one time because I know Andy giggles every time I say that word. We talked about that before when we were up here. The law says that we can, after so many years, money that we have that's stagnant or that has not been claimed must be sent to the state. It's the law, and unfortunately we haven't followed it. And so I'm happy to report that we applied to the treasurer for an exemption to say, we're sorry, please don't penalize us. We're going to get our house in order. They said, okay, we have till November, but we're finished today. And so we are going to send it this week. The amount wasn't that great. So there was money in treasure funds. The money was all there. And so it will be sent to the state, if not by the end of this week, by the end of next, and we will be up to date. And then from now on, every year, we will send back 3 years. So we will send 2015 at the beginning of next year and be compliant. So that was number one. Sure.
How far back did you, when had we stopped, or when
We
did
never
start
cheated money,
since?
ever.
I mean, does 2009, is that when it became the law or something like that?
I know that they've asked us to send money back as far back as 2009. So that's what we've done.
Okay,
But we've never sent,
as a county.
as far as I can tell, as a county.
Okay.
Right? And I will tell you, most of it is jury checks, which aren't for large sums of money, but there are some other larger sums. Number two, it's tax time, as many people know. We are trying to collect 192 million. That's basically the levy, and we're at about 170 right now. So we have about 20 to 21 million between now and Tuesday. Tuesday is the deadline. I think we're right on track. I have talked to Andy about formally recognizing the banks, and I think we'll do that moving forward. The amount of work that the banks are doing for us in this county is unbelievable. It would take 2 more full-time people to collect all the tax. We still collect the most here, but the banks have been incredible. We have a bank that'll collect near 20 million itself, one bank, which is unbelievable. And I don't know if I've talked about it or if anybody knows, but I institute an automatic or electronic escrow service this year. So all of our biggest escrow companies, Wells Fargo, CoreLogic, Loretta, they now pay to this electronic system. And we make $2 per payment from these out-of-town escrow agents. So we will collect this year additional revenue to the county, $25,000 for the payment of those escrow taxes from these out-of-town company entities. And so it's my hope that we come back here next year and we talk about maybe, God willing, if the election goes my way, we'll talk about reducing duplicate bill fees. We'll talk about lowering costs on our taxpayers because we can move some of those revenues or those costs to out-of-town large companies. And I certainly prefer that. I prefer CoreLogic to pay $2 per parcel as opposed to Mrs. Jones to have to pay a $5 duplicate bill fee or whatever it is. That's all I have today. Any questions? I'd be glad to answer them.
I need a motion to approve the county treasurer report, county collector's report, and the monthly resolutions. Motion by Mr. Washington, second by Mr. Serois. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like same. Motion carries.
Jim, can I add one last thing?
Sure.
I did want to say, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that treasurer or auditor Lee is the one who found the fact that we hadn't been sending our money to Springfield. So he brought that up, and without him, I wouldn't have known about it. And so I'm grateful to him that we found out about it and could get it done. Thank you.
Steve McCarty. Morning, Steve. You got miscellaneous? Oh, sure.
With the last minute, we were able to get information from our insurance folks, and they were going to make a presentation to the board, and I was hoping maybe we could do that first before Steve gets into it, because they might want to hit the road to get to where they got to be. So if that's okay, there's nothing to vote on. It's informational, and it should be part of this section since we're going to be talking about budget stuff down the road as well. Acceptable, Steve?
Yep, that's
Okay.
fine with me.
Okay, introduce him, Steve.
I don't know, why not? Motion to amend to include insurance in the finance
Okay.
presentation.
You got that?
All those in favor?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Thanks. Make them live. Mic them up.
Good morning. My name is Mike Lynch, and this is Dave Underkloffer. We wanted to bring you some news today about the group insurance, and I think the news is good. United Healthcare, through its benefit portfolio and I think some attempts to make some savings, has passed on this year the best renewal that I've seen since we've been here, a 4.9% increase. And that's prior to us doing anything about it, any negotiation, any market changes that we can find. But to support a little bit of this, that I wanted to take you back a couple of years and just kind of review what had gone on. In 2015, United Healthcare came to the county, and its first contract was for 15 months. It was up on 12/35 or 12/31 of 2016. United Healthcare that year had asked for a increase of, I believe it was 24%. The increase was significant, but we made some plan design changes and knocked down the original $4,179,500 to about $3,635,000. And that resulted in the savings of that year of about $544,000. The next year, the renewal, unfortunately, again, because of the experience, was about 27.9%, and we were able to redesign some of the plans. We recommended, if some of you might remember, that the HRA was done away with, and that expense was taken out of the budget. But that year, due to these plan changes and discounts, we saved about $606,000. So if you look at the 2-year savings, which includes 2017 and 2018, along with the average that was in the HRA, that's a 2-year savings of about $1,435,000, over the expenses that you would have paid had this not occurred, the negotiation and the plan design changes. And so this year, the third renewal, it stands at 4.9%, and I think in and of itself, it's a very good renewal because there's a report that you can take a look at. And down in the bottom, you'll see some yellow markings. Do you have copies there? Okay. You'll see that on the right side of the page, it says current period and prior period. In the prior period, the experience was 100.3, meaning that, 0.3% greater than the premiums that were taken in, were paid out in claims. This year, you'll see that it running right now at about 78%. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. Number one, we can't take a bow for everything. We've gotten lucky, I think. The medical expenses are way down, and the population is in better health. But I do think that some of the changes that have been made relative to the plan designs and some of these things and the cooperation of the county board and the finance committee have helped us get here by helping us put forth these changes. So I would say that the addition of some of these heavier forms of managed care, HMO, the PPO, some of the restrictions that are on drug expenses, things of that nature, have contributed to controlling some of these expenses. And right now, we're waiting on quotes to come in from the marketplace so we can see what we can do with that 4.9%. Can we get it down to 0, or what can we do with it? But we're waiting to see what those quotes are so we can go back and forth with United Healthcare. And we'll be reporting on that in the future with the Finance Committee. But I think in short, this is a really good, positive message. I don't know, Dave, you want to say anything about the experience report?
Not necessarily the report, but I will say this, that last year when we introduced the HMO, it became the most popular, I believe, plan that was offered. Sometimes when you have an HMO that's new to the population, we can get some claims issues or some understanding issues, but we haven't had that. We were expecting an uptick in maybe some concerns, some claims problems. We've not seen that at all. So it appears that not only is that the most popular plan, but people are satisfied with that, with their health plan offering there. So that's really, really good news for us.
Well, during the upcoming employee meetings, we're going to have to a greater degree, explain to some of the folks that leave the state that certain plans work for people here in Illinois that don't work for out-of-staters. But that's a comment for another day. But I think in general, I just saw something on this report. It says current period versus prior period. Down below there, you'll see on the right side of the page, a reduction in medical expenses and pharmacy expenses of almost 16%. So that goes to the core of why this renewal is so much better than. And there is some intent on United Healthcare's part, all carriers' parts, to control cost. And this year, with better health, it's worked. So we want to bring this to the Finance Committee and make sure that you knew where we were right now. We'll continue to work on it, and we'll bring it back after we get all the quotes in and let you know where we're going with it.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder where trend is, and for the other board members here who don't know what trend is, if you could explain that, because this has got to be below trend on this increase. So.
Yeah, this is below trend. So trend in the insurance industry is utilization and inflation. So we are seeing annual trends. Trends are still higher in pharmacy. Our trending here is going actually down in pharmacy. You would see trends probably mixing between medical and pharmacy, probably 7-8%. Managed care would keep those trends down. HMO would have a lower trend. You can see one of the things there is capitation. That's up 3.5%. Capitation means that in an HMO setting, We have physicians, for example, that get a flat dollar amount, and then they see their patients, and they're getting paid whether their patients basically go there or not. So they're taking the risk on how many they're going. So capitation is going up a little bit, but that's not your main expense. The main expense would be medical claims and pharmacy claims. So overall, yes, we are, right now, we're beating trends.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mr. Kinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not so much a question as a comment, that I also think this should be reflected upon the employees and those who have this insurance, that everybody is working together to control these costs, and certainly we owe our employees gratitude.
Yeah, without question, and one of the comments I'd make there is that the likelihood with this kind of a renewal of making more benefit changes or structural changes, design changes, is probably not necessary right now, which has been necessary in the previous 2 years to contain costs. So to your point, I would say that, for the employees and the use of the plan, that likely won't have to change, which is, it's not fun to pass on messages that your benefit plan has changed, because it means more cost and you're out of pocket. So, right now what we're looking at is, something that, is manageable and probably, will come down a little bit. This 4.9 likely could be massaged down. To what degree, I don't know. But it would appear to me that we're not going to have to make those benefit changes that hurt the most. So,
Any other questions? Did generics in the drug market make a change?
I'll have to answer that question after the fact. These reports don't reflect those specifics. There's a deeper report that goes to the core of that. But I think the last one that I remember was in the mid-80s, 84, 85% usage where it applied. And that's always good. But that's right about where the standard is in the industry, too.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for the report. That's
Thank you.
good news.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
As,
you.
as we're getting ready for budget discussions, why, that'll help.
Thanks. Thanks, Tom. Not a problem.
Okay. Okay. And let's see. Miscellaneous financial reports and
Yep.
discussion.
Good morning. Yeah, we'll start out with the reports we look at every month. On top, this month is the inmate bed rental revenue. As you can see, that trend continues in a very positive way. Just stop me if there's any questions or comments. Besides the inmate, the sales tax overall was a very good month. That just showed up for the month of for the retailer month of May that we received in August. Came in larger than the December retail month. That's interesting, that we received in March. So
Let me back up. Any questions on the inmate bed rental revenue chart? Mr. Chairman? Oh, okay. Hearing none, okay, then move.
oh, absolutely, yeah. You want to do one at a time?
Yep.
Or do you want to do a group?
Yeah. And anything on the countywide sales tax chart that you want to question? And on to sales tax analysis. Any questions there? And we have a use tax analysis on the general fund. Any questions? Oh, Mr. Kinzinger,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
in the mic, Ron.
All these numbers tend to run together. What's Steve's opinion of all these?
Well, it's a very positive trend that we're seeing. We did receive communication. We'll be interested to see the use tax trend. The Department of Revenue put out communication as far as online sales tax, and that will show up as that process begins in the use tax area, and so it'll be distributed by population, as the use tax does now. So it'll go into that pool. So we will see, that will definitely change, but we'll have to wait and see, you know, the impact of that at this point. So, and the other positive that what I've read and change in the state budget, that they've changed the percentage of income tax, and we saw a positive change, you know, in this particular month. So it was a 10% decrease. Now I believe it's to a 5% increase, but there was a negative change to the PPRT, the personal property replacement tax. So we're working on that, adjusting that down a little bit more from where it was, you know, in the budget. So we're watching this trend and plugging it all in, you know, and we'll be discussing, you know, the 19 budget as well as updated 18 trends going on. So yeah, that's all very positive news. Looking forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I apologize if, you know, we haven't talked about this yet in depth, but it's my understanding it's internet retailers that don't have brick and mortar in the state of Illinois have to pay use tax instead of a sales tax, correct?
That's correct.
And I believe use tax is divided up differently than sales tax, that where people like the RTA have a bigger stake in that tax kitty, if you will, than local government. So we shouldn't see, what I'm getting at is we shouldn't see a major increase in use tax. It will go up, but I think the prediction is it's the RTA is going to be smiling at people like that, but not necessarily us as much. So, but that's just on the surface. We really have to look at it.
Any other questions on that? You got the city and villages sales tax analysis. Any questions for Steve on that? Then the next would be the cash flow analysis. Any questions? Mr. Kinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'd like comments from Steve regarding this, the trend, where we're going, how's it look, what's happening, etc.
Well, I think it speaks for itself. If you look at the end of July 18 versus July of 17 on the as a comparison page, you can see how cash has trended in these major funds that we watch very closely with the interfund borrowing and the TAW activity. So it's a very positive trend right now. We're working on extending it out. We're working on, you know, the next tax levy request, and you know, and how it fits into all the funds with the budget activity, you know, for future TAWs and interfund borrowing. So it's a very positive trend, and as you can see, you know, and you'll see when we update August, I ran some numbers just to see where we're at, and the accounts payable number is going to be drastically different than, you know, even where it ended at July, because of what we've been able to pay off and catch up, you know, in the outstanding AP. So it's not a stretch to say it's been 6 or 7 years since we've been this caught up in AP. So it's a very positive thing to say, and I think the number, you know, that 6.3 number sitting at this, you know, time frame, we got, you know, additional distribution. We obviously have the final TAW payback, and you know, bond payments and et cetera. But you know, it's a very positive thing right now. So we're working on, you know, all of this trend going forward. So it's a much better discussion and much better analysis than it has been over the last few years, that's for sure. So
Any other questions, comments? Yeah, Mr. Stauffenberg.
Thank you, Chairman. Steve, do we have to apply for a better bond rating? Or do they just come around when they're looking at our financial situation with all this?
Yeah, I've expected a
news.
call or an email. I'm anticipating, you know, with the work I'm doing and update and all the updates. I believe we can, you know, if we want to, but I believe that there will be a follow-up from Moody's here soon, because they've been doing it approximately every August or September,
Okay,
every year. So I'm anticipating that will happen soon.
we've been kind of at the bottom, correct? Like junk bond rating?
Well, not the bottom, but
Pretty close.
we're
Well, let's see if we can't get up to notch one.
yeah, there's a lot a lot further depth to go, which we did not go, but that's the goal, is to get back above the line and head back where we were a number of years ago. So
That would obviously help our interest, the interest rate.
absolutely, yeah, it affects everything.
Any other questions? Comments, Mr. Sirois?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve, at this rate, are we even gonna have to borrow $1 million in February?
Yeah, with with the TAWs and the interfund borrowing, recall like highway, they have projects, you know what I mean, and so the balance is in between December and May to June, you know, that's always a cash flow shortage for us. So that time frame, we'll still need help for a couple more years before we get back on our feet
It does
completely.
look pretty close, like,
Yeah, it's much better, but that will help, and it will also help not only with the interfund borrowing aspect, but also keeping the vendors, you know, closer, you know, during that time frame. You know, and remember, we get out 90 to 120 days on a lot, and that's, you know, it's tough to do business that way. It's a huge gain, but we've still got a ways to go before we completely are able to stop and run on our own.
And we'll need to control costs yet.
that,
I mean,
if everything
if we go,
stays constant.
yep. Any other questions or comments? Okay, anything else, Steve? What do you got?
No, on that. The only item for your consideration for vote here, last month we did the general fund budget amendments. This month we have various special funds and budget amendments needed to continue the functions of these various, I believe there's 10 or 11 different special funds on 2 pages to adjust the original budget per the amounts here. So I don't know if I'll go over each and every one of them, but if there's any questions, can answer them. But it's pretty much to allow there's some new funds and new activity. So we're just making sure that budget and appropriations can continue, from what was known at the time that these were budgeted. So,
As to the special fund budget amendments, I'll need a motion and a second, and then we go into discussion. Mr. Legess with a motion, Ms. Dunbar with a second. Any discussion? Mr. Kinziger?
How about discussing 065, the first one? Looks like a big difference.
yeah, that fund is a capital fund from funds that have come from the Will County, the River Valley Juvenile Center, and the bond, and they're specifically identified for capital. So we're expecting approximately $200,000 when that whole deal closes, and then there's a number of items, emergency items that have taken place this year that the board is aware of, various committees, finance committee, the elevator at the downtown jail, the new boiler at the new ICANN building, and there's been x-ray machine. Andy, help me, I'm trying to list them all out on the top of my head here.
If I could, it's all of those emergency, I think that we put some roof stuff in there, I believe, did we not?
I believe, yes.
It's anything to do with infrastructure. This is restricted towards infrastructure and said, so we are paying it out of this fund. In order for us to do it, we have to amend, so there's an appropriation there. So we're trying to estimate throughout the rest of the year. It looks like these emergencies will be paying for those to the ending. I think we'll have another 150 on the elevator. coming up.
Yeah.
150,000.
Yeah, the entire bill has not shown up for that yet, so.
Any other questions on the special fund budget amendments? Hearing none, let's see, we need a roll call vote.
Mr. Lejas? Mr. Vickery?
Aye.
Mr. Washington? Mr. Stauffenberg? Mr. Hess? Mr. Seroy?
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand? Ms. Weber? Mr. Payton? Ms. Dunbar? Mr. Kinzinger? Mr. Zenz? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Next on the agenda is claims not recommended for approval. You have a copy in your packets. I'll need a motion and a second. Mr. Sirrise?
No motion on that.
No motion?
No. It does?
Mr. Sirrise with the motion. Mr. Payton with a second. All in favor? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Sirrise. Discussion? Sorry, discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm reading this, I just become aware that we're not gonna pay our accountants. Is that what this is about, sir?
I can't answer that.
Right.
I'm reading.
Mr.
We-
McCarty?
Yeah, we received this claim as it is presented to you on Monday. Basically, the auditor is not recommending it. You know, the auditor's office is not recommending payment at this time, so it's brought to the finance committee for their consideration and approval if you want to, do so.
Does anybody have any background on why the auditor would not? I can read a little bit, but the photocopy says auditor recommends this claim rejected, no public purpose. We recommend Mr. Wheeler reimburse the county for the auditors, and then I can't read the rest of it.
Oh, Ms.
What's the
Dunbar?
rest of it say? Can you read it? Yeah, please.
He's recommending Mr. Wheeler reimburse the county for this. The auditor's office could have provided this information free of charge. And I would ask Mr. Wheeler to expound on this.
Sure. Yeah, me too.
Well, I remember the letter.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
If I could. I'll give you the background on this. Since roughly, I think it was 12/20 or 12/23 of 16, there's been an ongoing discussion over what the term keeps the accounts and is the general accountant of the county is. And there was an agreement that there was accounting duties that needed to go into the auditor's office. Yeah. All right, so the accounting duties of the auditor's office. At full board, we'll discuss this, but as more of an announcement. But there was a need to be able to figure out what does a professional accountant, are they able to determine or provide information about what an accountant does within government accounting in terms of both on our level and federal accounting standards. It was asked of me by the state's attorney to go to other accountants outside of the county, whether they work for us or not, and ask for that opinion, because they are experts within that situation. So this little note here is meaningless in the terms of an outside opinion from an actual accountant. So these opinions that came in, I believe I had one or two that were unpaid and one that they charged us for, because everybody who provides a professional service, and that's what this is a professional service. It's a professional opinion, not a legal opinion, and it was performed at the request of the state's attorney's office to go find other people who could comment on the situation. And so I will not be reimbursing anything, because that is exactly what we were instructed to do by the state's attorney's office.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mr. Suarez?
Have we gotten any feedback from the Attorney General on this particular item? Because that's kind of what led us to this point for the letter?
Yeah. Yeah.
Has the Attorney General responded at all to our?
Yeah, I was gonna announce that to the full board, but yes, they have responded and said, no, they're not responding. They said they are at this time not gonna offer any opinion, so we're back to where we started almost a year and a half ago of us trying to work this out internally on the definition of what accounting is in the terms of what we have going on here. And I'm very hopeful that now we might be able to, and we're trying to sit down at the table and work this going forward so we can define what accounting is. But I rest assured that under no circumstances will accounting ever take away the duties and responsibilities of us to run the finance of this county. That is a clear line that will not be crossed. But we are working towards giving accounting to the auditor. There's a broad definition the auditor is using for accounting, which is everything including finance within our county. And we're gonna work towards resolving that. Hopefully, we can't do this in the middle of a budget year, so if we can't get it done by December 1st with all of our policies and procedures changing, because everything will change, we'll have to unravel 3.5 years of work to set this up. I don't see us doing it by December 1st. We'll put our best effort into it, but it would have, I'm hoping that by mid next year we have this all figured out and we can move forward on getting just straight accounting duties into the accountants or into the auditor's office.
And I have no problem with you, Mr. Wheeler, asking our accountants for that opinion. I think we should pay the bill that we asked them for their opinion. We should pay it. I don't understand the no public purpose portion of it.
I don't either.
But that's all.
Mr. Stauffenberg.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I think for $650 we shouldn't stick anybody. Let's pay the bill. I think vote down the motion to not pay it.
Any other questions or comments?
Just real quick, just please note, received July 24th. Okay, just note how long it sat in that office before it was brought to our attention. And we even talked about it a month ago. So our vendor's been waiting this whole time and it just showed up on our desk yesterday. So just note that, please.
Noted for the record. Any other questions or comments? That's yep. And roll call. That'll be a roll call vote.
My motion. Motion to approve. Motion to
Pay
approve
the
professional services rendered on 6/30/18 by Smith, Olin, Dykstra, Nolan. To pay it.
No, it's here to ask if you want to pay it or not. That's why it's here.
Yeah, I vote is to pay the bill. Okay. And that was the motion, right?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Dunbar, the second? Okay. Any other discussion on the matter? Hearing none, we'll go to roll call vote.
Mr. Largess.
Aye.
Mr. Vickery.
Aye.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Stauffenberg. Mr. Hess. Mr. Searoy.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Ms. Weber. Mr. Payton. Ms. Dunbar. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
That's all I had, unless there was
Any other questions
or
for
not.
Steve? Mr. Hess?
Do we need a motion to combine the miscellaneous finance and the cash flow updates? I don't think we had a motion to approve. Don't need
No.
one?
No
Okay.
motion on that. I have to go to my cheat sheet here.
All right.
Okay. Next up, Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Downey.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's always good to see Steve McCarty smiling. That's all I can say. I think the first thing on the agenda was the update. Real quick, our numbers are staying consistent. We did not have a criminal justice committee meeting, and so I went ahead and forwarded the report to the entire board along with some explanation of some things, so hopefully you all saw that. So if there's no questions on anything with ICE or that report.
And I say thank you. I got a good look at that report, and thank you for forwarding that to us.
Well, I think, you know, it doesn't hurt people to be informed, especially those that are making the decisions. So what's out there is sometimes not accurate, so I think it's important that you hear both sides of it. So the second thing, the elevator, I know that got brought up a little bit earlier, apparently is about 99.9% finished. They started it yesterday, and every time they powered it up, a fuse blew. So the elevator company is back today to get that fixed. So hopefully we'll be back and running as normal, hopefully later today. So, and that's all I got on the update. The other issue is, the other agenda item is the surplus items. We have a number of surplus items that we'd like the board to declare surplus, including 4 2011 Tahoes, 2009 Crown Vic that we kind of used as a utility car, a 1996 Ford van that was kind of used at the downtown jail, 16 Federal Signal light bars, which are non-economically unrepairable, non-economically unrepairable. I had to say it a few times so I'd get it right. It is.
We're used to those.
Yeah. We have 10 trunk organizers that we've been holding. They actually fit in Crown Vics. They don't fit in Tahoes. They've been sitting around our place for a number of years. And we also have 12 stalker radars that are also non-economically unrepairable. So all we need is a motion to declare those surplus.
With a motion, and Mr. Wheeler with a second. Any discussion? Ms. Dunbar.
Your email says
1999 Ford van, but you stated 96. Can you just clarify for the record?
What's on there is right. I don't have my glasses on.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Any other questions, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are any of the Tahoes planning worthy?
No.
They're okay.
No. The next group, we will have some that will be.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Did we get a motion? Okay, okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like same. Motion carries.
That's all I got.
Okay. Oh, we got a question, Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Chairman. Sheriff, do you have any comments about the letters that are coming out to the board members and that about the ICE detainee program?
I think the only thing I would say is that, like a lot of things, there are things that people think they know but they don't, as far as the type of detainee that we're housing. And you know, we have reached out to, I believe the people that have sent those letters. I met with them back a while ago. They have actually called, it was prior to when I went to the Ozarks, because they wanted a tour, and I said I will be back from the Ozarks on such and such a date, and I've never heard back from them for a tour. I did just receive a letter myself inviting me to the rally on Saturday, which I will, well, you know what, I don't have a problem communicating and discussing this, but it is, you know, it's the issue is so emotional for some people that regardless of what's out there in front of people, it's not, there's nothing I can say or anybody else can say that's going to change anybody's mind about this issue. That's just the issue itself. And I think Mr. Kinzinger probably said it best. Until they change legislation on a federal level, we have what we have. And if we want things changed, it's got to be changed at the federal level. So You know, we want to work with the people who have questions. We'll answer anything we can, but you know, there's a lot of information out there that they think they know, but they don't know. And that's not a criticism by any stretch. It's just that they're not involved in the day-to-day and the opportunities that these individuals do have to literally stay in our country. So I think their idea is that everybody gets deported that comes here, and that's not true in any way, shape, or form. There's processes that these individuals go through, just like anybody else in a criminal setting, in an ICE setting. They see a judge, and they make determinations at that level whether or not individuals get deported or not. So that's, I mean, I guess that's all I would say regarding the letters that they send out. But again, I'm more than willing to meet and sit down and talk. I've offered to give them a tour, and that's still out there. If they'd like to see it, I'd be more than happy to show it to them. Because this board has done an outstanding job in providing us the resources, and sometimes more resources than you want, to provide for these individuals in a way that is humane, and we respect their dignity. You know, we invited, actually we didn't invite, he showed up on his own. The Bishop of Joliet came down one day. He didn't want to be announced. He came down as a priest. He did not come down as a bishop. For those non-Catholics, you can ask a Catholic about it, but he came down as a priest and sent me a very nice letter about how we treated these guys. And it's something that I was very proud of, that he would take the time to do that, to tell us he doesn't agree with why they're housed. I get it. But if they are housed, he's glad that they're here and that we're taking care of them the way we are. I mean, that says a lot coming from a Catholic bishop. So,
thank you.
Any other questions, comments for the sheriff? Thank you.
Thank you.
Under the auditor's office, monthly claims, we'll need a motion and a second. Mr. Washington with a motion. Mr. Sirois with a second. This is a roll call. Oh, sure.
Thank
Ms.
you,
Dunbar.
Mr. Chairman. I recognize that the auditor's not here, but I wondered, perhaps, not to put you on the spot, Chairman Wheeler, but I just had questions about two of the claims. One is for website design for Red Earth Web. It's only $102, but I just wondered why there's an Oklahoma company. I thought Webfoot did our website. Is that for somebody else, like a department website? Do you know? It was out of the general fund.
I believe that is, that was the vendor that was already here. I can tell you that because I asked about the same thing when I was here before, and I think it was an update to a page or some type of infrastructure within the current site that they had programmed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a local company that
I
did
know.
that.
Yeah.
Believe me, when we have money for a redesign, it will be
Local.
because our
I mean, Webfoot
web-
does, and
yeah.
they're local.
Yeah, it's
Just the main
one of
page.
it's one of those things that you look at, and we're like Web 1.0. We're like in 1995
Yeah,
as far as our
yeah.
website. It's got to change, but we can't spend the money until we have the money. It's on the radar.
Okay.
So I'm thinking the next
Which-
year or two.
Thank you, which takes me to the second one, which was a $5,500 expense to Halo Branded Solutions. And that's a branding marketing company, also not local.
Do you know which department that was charged to?
I believe it was in the general fund. Oh. Oh, thank you, Sheriff.
That was, there was a tobacco grant that was paid, that should have come out of tobacco grant. We had $6,000 in the tobacco grant. We spent $5,500 for, it's say no to drugs, alcohol, stuff like that for kids.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions or comments? We need a roll call. Roll call vote.
Mr. Lejes? Mr. Vickery?
Aye.
Mr. Washington? Mr. Stauffenberg? Mr. Hess? Mr. Seroy? Mr. Hildebrand? Ms. Weber? Mr. Payton? Ms. Dunbar? Mr. Kinzinger? Mr. Zenz? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Any other business to come before this committee? Any other business to come before this committee? Any old business to come before this committee? Any old business? Any new business? If not, a motion to adjourn. Mr. Lejes and Miss Mr. Hess. All in favor signify by saying aye. Committee is adjourned.